All right, guys, welcome to the professor. Thank you for watching this video. Now, I have reported a lot about Eminifx. As you know, Eddie Alexson is actually in federal prison in Philadelphia serving a 9-year sentence. But I've always said that Eddie Alexson would not have been able to take over $300 million from the Haitian community if he didn't have the assistance of some of the Haitian Adventist pastors. And of course, I have been saying this for the better part of the last 3 years. And now we know from the records, because the receiver, David Castelman, filed a lawsuit against Pastor Maisonneuve and his wife, and also Eddie's wife is also named in the lawsuit as the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of Eminifx. Now, what I find amazing, which is basically what I said, this was part of my analysis, that there were millions of dollars that the pastors single-handedly, each pastors were collecting millions of dollars. There's no way that Eddie Alexson could have collected $300 million without all the pastors collecting at least $5–6 million. Now, we find out, obviously, from the record, that when the receiver, David Castelman, filed this lawsuit in the Supreme Court of Kings County in Brooklyn, he claims in his lawsuit, based on his record, that Pastor Maisonneuve basically collected $5 million from the churchgoers, from people from his church. Now, I've said this, and there is lawsuit, at least 2 that I know of, who have been filed against the Adventist Church. There is no way that the leadership of the Adventist Church did not know what the pastors was doing. And I have to tell you that if you think Pastor Maisonneuve was the ringleader, which he was to a certain extent, but it wasn't just Pastor Maisonneuve. There is another pastor named Pastor Franz Daiti. This guy basically was going to Boston, Massachusetts. He was going to New York, Hempstead, New York, Brooklyn. He was collecting money, not just from parishioners from his own church, but he was also collecting it from other churches around the tri-state area. And if you believe, and which is true, that Maisonneuve collected $5 million from people, Pastor Franz Daiti probably collected 3 times that, I would say $15 million. Now, this is what's very funny. This is not the first time that the Adventist Church, as an organization, have had people inside of the church who has been involved in fraudulent activities. This happened back in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. So this is sort of how people inside the church sort of fraudulently rip each other off. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to church. I'm not saying you shouldn't believe in God. In fact, I'm not even indicting the entire Adventist Church. But what I'm saying to you guys, if you are Haitian and you are going to church, Adventist church, and you have Haitian pastors, be very, very careful in what they offer you, especially when they offer to make you rich. Of course, as you know, you have to ask questions. Like I've always said, you have to write the right question if someone is asking you to invest on things that you don't even understand yourself. Now, having said this, I want to talk a little bit about the influence of the church of a pastor. And I think I've made a video once, but I want to talk about this. In our community, and also in other community, we just not just single-handedly believe this. We believe that people in position of authority, especially people who seem to have a connection with God, or people we believe are somewhat ordained by God to provide spiritual services, we always think that when these people speak, the word is from God. I'm here to tell you that may be true in certain circumstances, probably very rarely. But in most situations, when it comes to your own money, you got to be very, very, very careful, because you're an easy prey. Because you believe in your pastor. When you go to church, the pastor pray for you, the pastor preach for you, you have a problem with your husband or your wife, you go to the pastor, you believe that the pastor is someone who's sort of above everything else. But I want to tell you that pastors, just like lawyers, doctors, they're human too. They have the same frailties. They have the same sort of issues. They lie, they cheat, they make mistakes, they do all sorts of things. So what I'm saying is, treat your pastor, especially Adventist pastors, as you would treat anybody else. You have to respect them, of course, but treat them like anybody else. So when it comes to financial advice, when it comes to your money, you have to be very careful what the pastor tells you. Now, what's going to happen in this lawsuit? The receiver is suing Maisonneuve and his wife, Sophia Maisonneuve, and the wife of Eddie Alexson for at least $5 million. I think it's about maybe $20 million. Do they have the money to pay? I don't know if they have the money to pay. But I will tell you they did collect the money. Now, whether they give all that money to Eddie Alexson, nobody knows really what happened to it, because a lot of the money were given cash. People were actually coming to Maisonneuve, especially on Saturday, and bringing cold, hard cash to Maisonneuve, and he had this big sort of black plastic bag where people will dump money in it. And I have people who actually, this is not something that the professor is telling you. I'm not making this thing up. It sounds funny, but that's exactly what happened. People would go to Maisonneuve with $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, very cash money, like green cash, and dump it in a bag and write their name in a piece of paper. Okay, I give you $20,000. But nobody had receipt from Maisonneuve. Nobody, there's no one that I've met, or since I've been investigating Eminifx, who ever said that they got a receipt from anyone. So most of the people who give cash, presumably they're going to lose all that. They're not going to be able to get that money back. If the receiver is successful in his lawsuit against Maisonneuve, which I believe he will, those lawyers are very good lawyers. I have no reason to believe that he will not. He will. The good thing is that Maisonneuve just bought a nice house for $756,000 about 2 years ago. Now, he also created a trust and trying to put the house in a trust, trying to sort of shield his asset and other thing that he has, so that people like the receiver or the court may not be able to get to it. But I have a news for Maisonneuve, okay? When you do that type of stuff with the intent to defraud people you already defrauded, oh, they're going to get to that money. They're going to get to that house. I have no reason to believe that you're going to be able to hide this. So it is sad. It is sad, not just for the church, for the Adventist church and the people in the church, and also the other pastors who were very good, because there were other pastors that I spoke with within the church who actually knew from the beginning that this was a fraud, that this was a Ponzi scheme, and they were actually telling people, other pastors, not to get involved. But I figured that for some pastor, the idea of making easy money, of trying to defraud people that who believe in them, who trust them, was just too great to pass on. So what they did was they continued to collect money, even though they knew that Eminifx had no investment to speak of. Eminifx had no return in investment. There was no real tangible asset that Eminifx was actually invested in. So, and they were keep telling people, put in your money. And the thing is that when people put in money, let's say somebody put in $5,000, and then they want to withdraw money, or they want to withdraw what seemed to be a profit, but not real profit, the pastors, Pastor Maisonneuve, will encourage them to keep the money. Or I have fait petit la have grandi, what fait ça really compounded the interest. They don't get interest or interest. So this was not just fraud, but it's one thing, guys, to commit fraud ab initio. In other words, it's one thing to tell someone something that you believe is fraudulent in order to take their money. But it's another thing to sort of add to the top of the fraud, so that you already committed the fraud, you took the money. Now when they're trying to get some of that money back, you committed another fraud by making promises that you knew from the time you were saying it were totally untrue. So Maisonneuve and his wife, you know, is into a lot of trouble. They're going to have a lot of problems, because I don't think any judge in New York City is going to look favorably upon Maisonneuve or his wife, because they knew what they were doing. What do I hope for? I'm sure that the receiver will win this case. And as sad it is to say, I hope that Maisonneuve loses everything he works for his entire life. It's not mean of me to say this, and I hate to say this, but when someone take advantage of the vulnerable, and the reason I call these people vulnerable, is because they were under the influence of Maisonneuve even before he started the fund, and he knew this because he's a pastor. I grew up in the church. My uncle is a pastor. I grew up around pastors. You know, I was a child who would always ask questions. You know, I was the child that you don't want to mess with because I have all kind of questions that I wanted to know. So I know what the church is. I know what the pastor represents. And the pastor has what we call a very significant responsibility because of his position in the community. So when you have somebody like that commit fraud, it's not just the person commit fraud, it's that the person violate the cardinal rule that you do not, you know, whip off the people that you are supposed to be responsible for, especially in the matter of, you know, I guess in the matter of spirituality. So, again, let's see what happened. I will keep you abreast of what happened with this lawsuit, but I'm also going to talk to the receiver. I think the receiver should go after Franz Daiti and some of the other pastors who I believe were probably worse, somewhat worse than Maisonneuve. Okay? Thank you for watching The Professor. I will see you soon.